Welcome to 9-Star Newsroom. I'm Dave Hill. Earlier this summer, Hancock Regional Hospital opened its new $10 million cancer center here in Greenfield. It's a state-of-the-art facility that will offer this full spectrum in treatments to patients, but much closer to home than what they're used to. We recently visited the new center and spoke with patients and those who care for them about the new tools at their disposal. We learned a lot about the science of cancer treatment, but as you're about to see, we also met some extraordinary people. When a patient comes to Hancock Regional Hospital's Cancer Center for treatment, they're probably going to see 3 doctors. They will see one who takes care of chemotherapy, they will see a surgeon, and they will also see a radiation oncologist. That's who we're with right now, Dr. Julia Compton, who's a radiation oncologist here at Hancock Regional Hospital. And the hospital has added this $2 million radiation machine, a linear accelerator, I believe it's called.
That's right.
To take care of radiation treatments for patients who require that. Dr. Compton, can you first of all describe how the machine works and what it does?
Yeah. So what we have behind us is a linear accelerator. This is made by a company named Varian. The type of machine is called a TrueBeam. And it's a brand. It's like any type of ketchup, Heinz, etc. That's the brand. But what makes this machine so special is that this is truly a state-of-the-art machine, one of the newest machines out on the market. So what has happened over many, many years is radiation oncology has continued to advance in terms of the technology and what we can do in terms of the precision and the types of treatments that we can offer patients. But what has happened is as the technology has advanced, most machines, that technology is just added to the machines. There's many, many moving parts on most of the older machines, which means more chance for that machine to have parts that break. This technology, this machine has been rebuilt from the ground up. So everything works together. And what happens is the machine itself has a lot of features on it that work within the machine in order to help deliver the radiation much more flawlessly and without as many issues, but with that becomes more precision and more rapidity for which to deliver the treatment. So these are some of the important features that we love. So one of the things are these nice square boxes that you can see. And these are imaging devices. So what that means is that when the patient is laying on the table, we take pictures prior to the radiation ever being turned on in order to localize where that treatment or where that cancer is going to be treated. The nice part about that is that technology for imaging has been something that would be very grainy, be very difficult to see. With this new technology, you get pictures that show the inside of the body very similarly as if you were up in radiology getting a regular CT scan. So that's great because you can actually visualize the tumor now. The next part is the head of the machine. So this part actually has moving, what we call leaves. And those moving leaves help us to make shapes in order to go around the edge of a tumor. Because you can imagine tumors aren't all a perfect round circle. They certainly aren't a square. But with those leaves, we can shape how that tumor is treated and where the radiation goes precisely.
Many hospitals have machines like this. I'm not sure too many smaller hospitals are able to enjoy having all 3 phases of cancer treatment in one facility. That makes the new cancer center, I think, maybe somewhat unusual among small hospitals.
Right.
To the extent that we now have all 3 therapies available, to what extent does that help the hospital become a fully fledged cancer center?
So I think there's a couple components here. One of them is by having all 3 disciplines in-house, so to speak, patients from just a convenience standpoint, it's a night and day difference. So most patients will get chemo and radiation together. A lot of times chemo is delivered weekly, radiation is given every day. And when we do that, we give a tiny dose of radiation each day, and that's in order for the healthy cells that are nearby the radiation to be able to recover. So we give a tiny dose each day. But if you can imagine that you're a patient who's getting chemo and radiation on the same day, if you have to go to another facility to get your radiation, you're spending 3 to 5 hours getting chemo, and then you have to drive somewhere to get your radiation. And the great part about this is here, you just walk right downstairs. And so it's very seamless in terms of transitioning between one area and the other. The same is true of the surgery. Surgeries are a big deal, you know, the recovery time, what you have to go through, having that all in one place with great surgeons, great physicians, makes a huge difference to patients. And what we hope to build here is that sense of when you walk through the door, you're seeing friendly faces, but you're also having an environment that's very relaxing, that's very open, that brings in a lot of natural light. So you don't feel like you're in a hospital, so to speak. We all have heard or know about white coat syndrome. Your physician walks in with a white coat on, immediately your blood pressure rises, you start to get a little nervous. How's the interaction going to go? What news are they going to give me? And so that's something that we really try hard to keep in mind here, is we want everything to feel as relaxed and nice as possible, so that when people come in, they're in a much more relaxed state to hopefully help with how they are going through their cancer treatment and how they ultimately feel at the end of the day. But what I love about Greenfield, what I love about Hancock Regional, is most of the people here are local. Most of the people know the patients when they're walking in the door. And so you know the story behind that patient. You know kind of what helps make them tick. You know about their families, but you also know all the details of their cancer. And then when they come into this environment where you have chemotherapy and radiation therapy literally right next door to each other, that gives us the ability to work very closely. So it's tougher in big hospitals where maybe chemotherapy is 2 buildings away or the surgeons are much farther away. In this environment, everything is very close together, but in a new facility. So you have state-of-the-art technology. You have everything that's new and cutting edge, but at the same time, you still have that camaraderie and that sense of, I could just walk down the hall and talk to my colleague about a patient, or I can call upstairs or just down the hall to one of the nurses who knows just as much as I do about this patient, say, hey, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? So I think it's phenomenal. And I think one of the things that you have to remember is that what we have here in Greenfield, literally in most people's backyard at this point, is the same as what we can provide in Indianapolis. So many of us were either trained in Indianapolis or still work part-time in Indianapolis, and so we get to see the features of both places. And so when we tell you that the technology here, not only from the radiation standpoint, is better than most of the hospitals in Indianapolis, that's an absolute truth. And we tell you that we have everything here now that you can get in Indianapolis, and we still have, again, that state of technology, the people who are different in this smaller environment because they know you as a person. It almost makes that drive to Indianapolis as you drive by the cancer center painful, because you think, well, I could get great care, just as good a care, maybe even better care because people know me so well here at the center, but I'm going to drive right by it to go that extra 45 minutes to Indianapolis to fight the traffic, to create more anxiety in my life. And so for me, being, you know, a physician here, potentially a patient here at some point in time, I think it makes sense to come to Greenfield. It makes sense to come to Hancock Regional because you can get the same treatment here as you can get in Indianapolis. I think that's one of the big things that I want to tell people and I want to share with people. This is a great place. And it's not just a great place because of the people, which we all know make the world of difference, but it's a great place because we have all of the technology, and in most cases, better technology than they have at a lot of the Indianapolis hospitals.
Thanks for joining us, Dr. Compton.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Dr. Hayek, one of the major things that helps patients, which we tend to take for granted, is just the sheer convenience of having a cancer center nearby. They don't have to drive long distances to get treatment, and after your 3rd or 4th treatment, you don't feel like making a long commute to a hospital in Indianapolis. Can you talk about how that figures into the healthy outcome for a person?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Dave. We have somewhat of a unique community. It is rural. It is somewhat far away from the city. In the past, patients used to drive quite a distance to arrive to the treatment center. And even now, we have patients who come from farther away to come and be treated at our center, and you might imagine how far they would have driven if we did not exist. This has provided a great opportunity for patients to be able to be treated locally, without the hurdle of going and travel 30, 45, or 60 minutes while they're sick, while they're on chemotherapy, while they're having a lot of other side effects such as sickness to the stomach, or fatigue, or dehydration, and so on. So that actually reflected very positively on the patient's outcome. We're talking about the clinical outcome.
With us now in the Hancock Regional Hospital Cancer Center Oncology Ward are two of the most experienced nurses on the ward. Sherry Lawrence, who is the nurse navigator, and I'll ask her to explain what a navigator does here in a second, and Linda Holliday, who's the nurse supervisor and who has been at Hancock Regional Hospital for a long time. Sherry, let me first of all start with you, and just will you tell me what it is a navigator does?
Absolutely. So a navigator meets with the patient for the very first time when they come in with a diagnosis, or maybe calls them ahead of time and talks to them, answers questions for them. So I'm there sort of as that lay interpreter, so that they have someone that they can reach out to and understand what that physician is saying. And then at that point, I'll meet them back here when they come back for their chemotherapy. We do a distress screening, reach out for resources that they might need, whether that's financial, or whether they need a social worker, or whether they need a referral out to someone else. Then when they come back for their chemo, I meet with them again. We get a consent to make sure that they understand what my role is and that they're interested in that kind of person. I can make a calendar out for them. I follow them throughout their chemotherapy. We do an additional distress screening in the middle of their therapy, and then at the end they're given a survivorship care plan. And that survivorship care plan includes their journey through their cancer, tells them what their follow-up should be, tells them how they were diagnosed, when they were diagnosed, and the information that they need going forward if they would move out of the country, for instance, or out of the state.
Between the two of you, you have many years of experience. I'll ask you to do the math in a second. But this is also a very experienced staff, isn't it, Linda?
Yes, most of the staff, the youngest one here has 15 years of experience. So, and I used to be her 4-H leader, so that I know of all the nurses here and the staffs here are very, very experienced in oncology, which is very, very hard to find.
With us now is Beth Higgins from rural Greenfield, who is getting her first treatment today in the medical oncology department here at the Cancer Center at Hancock Regional Hospital. Beth, how are you doing today, and how's your first treatment going?
I'm doing fairly well. I needed some extra blood today, so they're pumping me up. My treatments are going very well as far as I can tell. We're just getting started, so it's going to be 4 to 6 months before we actually see the overall effect.
How do you think that the convenience is going to figure into your treatment going forward?
Well, I think it doesn't make you have to stop and think, is the road condition such that I want to make this trip? It's just so simple, right straight in 9 for me. And if I'm here during the winter, then that should be a very simple thing. If they say, I hate to make you come back tomorrow, it's like, well, why? It's so easy. It's like you mentioned, it's no more than going to the grocery store to pick up something you forgot to get the day before. 15 minutes today is nothing.
We're with Carol Erdman, a patient here at the Cancer Center at Hancock Regional Hospital, who's gracious enough to sit down with us today for a conversation about the Cancer Center and her treatment. Mrs. Erdman, thank you for being with us
you're
today.
welcome.
The first question I want to ask you is, you're not from Greenfield.
No, I'm not.
But you do commute from the east side of Indianapolis.
Yes.
You had a chance to go to some of the bigger cancer centers elsewhere in the city. Why did you choose to come to
Well,
Hancock Regional?
I just didn't want to get in all that traffic on 465. I feel I'm a more danger to other people than I am to myself, and I like coming down to a 2-lane road, and just drive at my leisure. Now, granted, the speed limit's 45, and that's good for me. I don't need to go 70, and I just enjoy the scenery, even though it's country. There's nothing there to see but corn, but I love it. It's just a peaceful way to just be calm. coming to here.
And that's very important, going through what you go through with,
Right.
with each of your treatments.
Right.
Is at least getting here and going home is not as stressful.
Right.
as-
Very much so. I mean, it just calms me. And even going home after, even though there's nothing dramatic about the radiation, but it's still, you kind of get yourself uptight thinking about it. But even on the way home after it's all done, I can calm myself down and be fine by the time I get home. But I have not met anyone in this program, in cancer part, that is in a bad mood or anything. They're always smiling, or it's really very comforting.
Joining me now is Steve Long, the president and CEO of Hancock Regional Hospital. Mr. Long took over at Hancock Regional just over a year ago and helped shepherd the final phases of construction of the new cancer center. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being on 9-Star Newsroom today. At one point in your career, you worked at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. That's one of the most well-regarded cancer hospitals in the country.
Mm-hmm.
How would you compare the care and facilities now available at Hancock Regional with what you saw when you were in Texas?
Well, you know, we have some of the highest technology in the state of Indiana, and in fact, it's some of the highest technology in the country with our new linear accelerator that we have installed inside the cancer center. So when I was at MD Anderson Cancer Hospital down in Houston, Texas, it was the largest cancer hospital in the country, and it ranked 1 or 2 in the country every year. And all they do is cancer, and it was an amazing place. 15,000 employees that were engaged solely in research to destroy cancer and then treatment of folks that actually had cancer. And their tagline was "Making Cancer History," which had double meanings. And so I got to see a lot of technology down there. One of the biggest pieces I saw was when they installed one of the first proton accelerators in the country. And it was a $130 million facility back in those days, and it was built entirely underground, and it was made to be able to concentrate accelerated protons at the cancer, at the tumor, so that it could destruct it without harming the tissue around it. And believe me, I was amazed as I was talking to the folks who were installing the linear accelerator here in our very own cancer center, that it does almost the same thing. So technology has progressed from the point where you had to go to this purpose-built underground facility to have the kind of treatment that you can get today. Now, it's not the same as a proton therapy unit, but what it does is it can minimize the damage to the tissue around the tumor, and it keeps it within less than 1/2 millimeter of that area. So it's amazing technology. I would say that the facility and the ambiance and the environment that you're in match very closely with what I saw with that very large cancer hospital. The technology is right there. Our nurses have 90 years of experience, and the physicians are extraordinary.
In what ways does the new cancer center figure into the hospital's long-term strategy?
Wow, you know, healthcare is in a period of transition right now. The whole healthcare industry is transforming itself away from a facility and an environment where we take care of people after they get sick to trying to prevent sickness in the first place. What we know, though, is that people will always get sick. People will always break a bone. They'll always have a heart attack, even though we want to prevent those. And people will always get cancer, because many types of cancer are not preventable. So that kind of treatment is important, and our goal is to be not only a world-class medical care facility, but also a world-class facility to prevent disease from happening. So it fits perfectly with our future viewpoint, in that we are a regional hospital and healthcare organization that takes care of folks here, and the more technology and the more specialty services that we can bring right here close to home, the better care we can take of the residents of this region.
As we saw during our visit, and in the course of reporting on this story, the layout of the new facility really stresses the importance of patient comfort. Mm-hmm. But one thing we noticed was that the support for family members also, a lot of thought went into that in terms of the facilities and the amenities that the new center is providing. How would you grade the new center's amenities for catering to the needs of families and the overall outcome of patient care?
You bet. It is absolutely top-notch. From the time that you walk through the front door and you see that beautiful entryway with the fireplace and with the water feature, with the nice seating, and the library, the small study room that's off to the side where people can go there to be in a quiet area, to the bar where we have the coffee, and we have drinks that are available, to the patio that's outside of the medical infusion center where people can go into a controlled environment and yet be outside looking at the garden that's on top of the linear accelerator. All of those things were built to not only help the patient be in a healing environment where you walk in and you just feel like you're healing, but it's also for the family, because we know, especially in these kind of cases, the family is every bit as much our patient as the actual patient is. And so we build it so that they can all feel healed, they can feel welcome, and they can feel that they're in an environment that is conducive to making that next step in their progress.
That's great. That the hospital actually goes a step further and contemplates the needs of the families as well. The new cancer center is basically the centerpiece of a really ambitious expansion for services and facilities for Hancock Regional. You know, for example, you're building the new wellness center in McCordsville.
We are.
In the past couple of years, you've forged partnerships, like for example with the AMG Rehab Hospital. You've got the Jane Pauley Center that you've formed a partnership with, and they've opened a clinic for lower income people. So what's next for Hancock Regional Hospital? Anything you can talk about?
You bet. Well, suffice it to say, we have a strategic plan that has many, many elements in it, but it's all focused around those two core ideas: world-class medical care, and then also building a environment in our area, our service area, that is conducive to wellness and prevention. So as we look at that, all of these things fit right in there. The Cancer Center is part of it, which is really built on a tradition that was started by the Wound Care Center with hyperbaric oxygen treatments, and then also the Cardiac Catheter Lab, where we have this extraordinary equipment that does cardiac catheterization. So lots of technology, and that whole environment that is healing. When you go up to our inpatient units, we have remodeled those so that they are very welcoming also. So as we look at that future, the Wellness Center, for example, fits very well, because it is not only focused around prevention and wellness, but it's also connected to our medical office campus up in McCordsville, so that we can bring that service to a growing area of the county where the folks are young families that are pretty highly educated and they understand the importance of this. And then as we look even farther down the road, we're examining different kinds of things, like for instance, how do we make it easy for patients to access us? So how do we have as many points of access, both physically in terms of clinics, but also virtually? Because we all have these smartphones and these devices that we have, and we have computers, and we often would like to speak to a physician over the internet or over our smartphone. We're working on that technology. We're upgrading our electronic health record. Now, we received an award just a few weeks ago saying we were one of the top 100 wired hospitals in America out of 5,000 hospitals. And we're seeking to take that even to the next level, where we truly integrate all those databases together, and the patient portal is that patient's point of entry into that electronic world of the electronic health record. So that's going on as well. So all kinds of things. We have dove into the idea of population health. So we have a contract with Medicare where we actually have said to Medicare, we're going to try to decrease the cost of taking care of patients that have Medicare for their insurance. And so we have looked into the database. We found the folks that are the sickest, and we're partnering with them, coming alongside with care management nurses that can help them have a better experience in the healthcare system, have better outcomes, and thus lower the costs as well. So we have all kinds of things that we're working on in many different directions, but all focused around those two things: world-class medical care, and to be able to have an environment that we live in that really helps prevent those illnesses from happening in the first place.
Everything you're describing speaks to an increasing sophistication in care, and just in providing services for more of a regional patient base. In fact, you were talking in a previous conversation that we had that even 10 years ago, the care was not nearly as improved as it has become since that time. Another thing that you've also noticed since you've been here just a little over a year now is dealing with the stigma about the small town hospital.
Yeah.
And I think you've acknowledged that's been tough to overcome. So what are you doing to convince people that their local hospital is up to the challenge to meet their health care needs?
Well, it's an interesting thing, because we all have a perspective that bigger is better. And so we look at the local environment and say, well, if it's downtown and it's bigger, it must be better. And that's really not always the case. You can look at folks that live in the very rural areas east of here, and they look at our community and say, well, Greenfield is bigger, therefore it must be better. So they don't even utilize their own services. So it's an interesting way of looking at things that we have. And frankly, you know, our hospital has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And it was a smaller, fairly rural hospital in the past. But through a long period of investment, both in the infrastructure and the building, and also recruiting specialists and more providers to be here locally, the investments in the technology and the training have elevated what we can do. And I really have to give the credit to Bobby Keene, who was the CEO for 20 years here, that he and the leadership team and the board and the medical executive committee, they all worked together to say, how can we make the service that we provide that much better? That is why we have the cardiac cath lab and the wound healing center and the new cancer center. We have the wellness center that we've had for a while and the new one in McCordsville, all of the new facilities that we have, all of the physicians that we have. You know, we have specialists in almost every specialty that practice right here in Greenfield and in some of our other areas around the county. And as in the case of the cancer center, they are the very same physicians that provide cancer care at St. Vincent's and St. Francis. So we provide those services here locally, and we layer that with the technology, with the facilities, and with the highly educated, very competent staff that we have, so that it is not the place that people remember from 30 years ago. Because you know that the number one thing that I hear is that somebody will remember Aunt Mildred's second cousin's brother's neighbor had a bad experience 30 years ago in the ER, and so they aren't ever going to come here. And it's unfortunate because it is such a different place now.
Looking to the future, you know, we're going through an era of consolidation and just massive expansion from the bigger hospitals. You know, Community Hospital, for example, is about to undertake a major expansion at its East Side campus, which kind of butts right up against your market.
Yes.
So how is Hancock Regional going to meet that challenge and to avoid being swallowed up by bigger conglomerates?
Well, it is an interesting trend that's been happening in the healthcare industry for quite a few years now, and that is the conglomeration of healthcare providers and insurance companies. We've just seen the number of large insurance companies in America drop from 5 to 3 with the recent acquisitions of Humana and Cigna. So that has happened also in the provider community. When you look at central Indiana, we have 4 large health systems, and one of those, Community Health Network, is right on our doorstep. And what we understand is that we are an independent, community-owned organization, and the very best care is provided that way. I look at a comparison with 9-Star Connect, you know, an independent, locally owned and operated organization that can tailor the service offerings to the needs of the community in the way big places can't. So we really believe locally owned care is important because we can tailor ourselves to our needs. That said, we also know that we'll never be able to do everything. We don't do transplants here, and nor should we, because only very big places that have a lot of experience and do a lot of those cases do that very well. So we have relationships with community, for example. We have a relationship with our surgical center. With St. Vincent's, we have a relationship with the Cancer Center and with the Cardiology Center. And so those relationships are important. So we will have the very best care for the things that we do. Nobody will do it better than us. And it's right here close to home. And for that higher level care, we have seamless transitions because we have partnerships with those folks. So our vision is that you will use us because we are the best, and we are demonstrably the best. In fact, if you look at our quality scores, there's a company that Medicare contracts with. It's called Health Insights. If you go out to their website, you will find that we are the top quality hospital in central Indiana. And out of the 140 hospitals in the state, we're number 14, so we're 10th, or we're in the top 10% for the entire state. We have great quality here. So, great quality, access to specialists, technology, a facility that's second to none, staff that are highly trained and are from here, and you put that all together with the physicians that we have, I mean, why would you go anywhere else?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Appreciate you joining us today. That's our report for this week. As always, we'd like to hear your feedback and suggestions for future stories. I'm Dave Hill for 9-Star Newsroom, and we'll see you next time.